The Shield is dead. That's what they told us. What Paul Heyman told us. What the fans believed. Hell, even Bron Breakker believed it. Until last night, when Roman Reigns returned at Money in the Bank 2025, unannounced, unbothered, and backed by something no one expected, a masked soldier built from the ashes of the Shield. No music. No pyro. Just pain. And the look on Bron Breakker's face? Like he saw a ghost. A ghost with fists. One moment he's hyped, hungry, barking like a contender, the next? He's frozen. Eyes locked. Game plan shattered. Because when Roman showed up with that mystery Shield enforcer, everything changed. This wasn't a comeback. It was a takeover. And now the question is burning, who's behind the mask, and what does this mean for Bron Breakker's rise? Let's break it all down. But that belief died the moment Roman Reigns stepped out of the shadows, unannounced, unbothered, and flanked by a masked enforcer cloaked in black. No music. No pyro. Just a cold silhouette and the sound of 19,000 fans simultaneously gasping in disbelief. This wasn't just a return. This was an invasion. And in the middle of the ring, Bron Breakker, who had been barking, hyped, pacing like a pit bull moments earlier, went stone still. Not from fear. Not from surprise. But from something deeper. Something primal. Like a soldier spotting a ghost on the battlefield. A ghost with fists, armor, and unfinished business. Let's set the record straight. Money in the Bank 2025 was already full of fireworks. Cody Rhodes had retained his championship in a brutal Iron Man match. The women's MITB ladder match had 2 ladder collapses, a referee bump, and a surprise return from Naomi. Fans were already calling it a top 5 MITB in history. And then Roman showed up. And suddenly, everything else faded into the background. Let's freeze the frame. Bron Breakker stands center ring. Sweat dripping. Eyes wide. His chest heaving from his earlier match. But he's no longer locked in on a target. He's locked in on something else entirely. Something off script. Something he didn't train for. The camera cuts to the entrance ramp. The lights don't go out. There's no signature dun 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 beat of the Shield's old theme. No vest. No spotlight. But there's movement. Roman Reigns emerges first, wearing black pants, black boots, and a black tactical jacket zipped to the top. Minimalist. Military. Stone cold. And behind him? A second figure. Same black gear. Same slow, methodical walk. But this one's face is covered in a matte black mask. No logo. No eyes. Just blank intimidation. A presence more than a person. The commentary table? Silent. Michael Cole doesn't say a word. Pat McAfee mutters one line under his breath, "That's not possible," and just like that, WWE's entire power dynamic shifts on its axis. Here's the thing, everyone expected a Roman Reigns return eventually. The rumors were endless. Some thought SummerSlam. Others guessed Survivor Series. A few diehards predicted Royal Rumble 2026. But no one, and we mean no one, thought he'd walk back in like this. No entrance. No build-up. No warning. Just a presence. A new energy. And that look. This wasn't Tribal Chief Roman. This wasn't Big Dog Roman. This wasn't even Undisputed Champion Roman. This was something colder. Sharper. Tactical. A general returning to the battlefield with a weapon the WWE Universe didn't know existed. A weapon forged from the ashes of the Shield. Now, let's talk about Bron. Bron Breakker has been the face of WWE's next generation. Fast. Explosive. Ruthless. Built like a linebacker with the speed of a cruiserweight. He talks like he means it and hits like he's trying to send your soul through the canvas. Coming into MITB, he was on a 6-month undefeated streak. Every backstage analyst said the same thing: Bron's the future. He's not just next, he's now. He came out that night looking like a beast. Black trunks. Bloodline armband ripped off in defiance. No fear. No hesitation. Until Roman came out. 1 second, Bron was barking and pacing like a predator. The next, he was frozen. Eyes locked on Roman. Then on the masked figure behind him. The bark stopped. The pacing stopped. The swagger vanished. And for the first time in his WWE career, Bron looked unsure. Because he wasn't looking at just one man. He was looking at a message. A message that said, "You thought the Shield was dead? You thought we were gone? Think again." Why does this moment matter so much? Because it shattered perception. Fans thought they knew who the players were. Cody, Bron, Seth, Solo, they were all jockeying for control in Roman's absence. The tribal chessboard had changed. But what this moment revealed was that the king hadn't left the game. He'd just been planning a new opening. Roman's silent entrance wasn't just creative direction. It was psychological warfare. No music means no cue. No pyro means no build. No words means no clue what he's thinking. Just presence. And Bron, who had bulldozed his way to the top through sheer intensity, suddenly found himself outmatched, not physically, but mentally. Spiritually. Existentially. He was looking at a force he didn't know how to handle. Here's what fans are asking right now: who is the masked figure? Is this the new Shield? Is Roman building a new faction? Or unleashing a new philosophy? And most importantly, what happens to Bron Breakker now? This isn't just a feud. It's a new chapter. A redefinition of dominance. If Roman's return marks the beginning of a campaign, what's the objective? And why start it by psychologically dismantling the most promising young star in the company? Is Bron being targeted or recruited? Because we're not just going to replay what happened. We're going to unpack it, layer by layer. We'll break down the subtle details in Roman's appearance that hint at his new direction, what the gear of the masked enforcer tells us about his origins, the symbolism of this return, and what it says about WWE's future, how Bron Breakker's response might be the most important moment of his career, and by the end, you'll not only understand what happened, you'll know why it happened. You'll see the pattern. You'll see the war plan. And you'll realize, this wasn't just a return. It was a declaration. No one heard it coming. That's the first truth about Roman Reigns' return at Money in the Bank 2025. There was no music. No Titantron package. No warning. WWE has made a living off bombastic surprises, shock pops, pyros timed to drum beats. But this? This was something else. This was silence weaponized. The MITB men's match had just ended. Bron Breakker was standing tall. He'd flattened Drew McIntyre with a top rope spear. Crowd on their feet. Camera zooming in on Bron's wild eyes, his body tense with adrenaline. You could almost feel the torch passing, right there in the ring. A new king crowned. And then, it stopped. Not with a crash or explosion. But with the absence of everything. The lights didn't cut out. The music didn't hit. There wasn't even a shift in the crowd's mood at first. Just a flicker. A confused murmur. Then a fan's scream. Then gasps. Because something moved on the entrance ramp. A figure stepped out. Half shrouded in shadow. Black pants, black boots, black tactical vest. No decals. No logos. Not even a trace of shine. Just matte black from head to toe. It was Roman Reigns. But it wasn't Roman as anyone remembered him. He wasn't walking with his usual slow, deliberate gait. He wasn't soaking in the crowd. His hair was tied back tight, not loose around his shoulders. His eyes weren't scanning the arena, they were fixed on the ring. And he wasn't alone. Behind him came a second figure. Not walking behind Roman in submission. Not in his shadow. This figure walked exactly one step back and to the left. Like an enforcer. Like someone trained to cover an angle. This second man was taller than Roman. Bulkier. He wore the same gear, black on black, but his face was covered by a tactical mask. No facial features. Just a pair of matte goggles and a flat black mouthplate. It didn't breathe. It didn't move. It just followed. Roman didn't stop. He didn't pose. He didn't lift his arms. He walked. Straight down the ramp. Unblinking. Unrushed. Like time had frozen for everyone else. Inside the ring, Bron Breakker turned. First confusion. Then focus. Then stillness. He stopped bouncing on the balls of his feet. His arms slowly dropped to his sides. His chest was still heaving from the match, but it didn't rise the same way. His eyes locked in on Roman, then on the man behind him. And for a second, one single frame, you could see it hit him. This wasn't a return. It was a message. Reigns reached ringside. The commentary table was dead silent. Michael Cole, for the first time in what felt like his entire career, said nothing. Pat McAfee leaned back in his chair. Barely breathing. The camera zoomed in on their faces, pure disbelief. Roman climbed the steel steps. Not fast. Not slow. No theatrics. No signaling. He stepped through the ropes. The masked man stayed outside. Roman walked directly into Bron's space. Not in a confrontational way. Not aggressive. Not performative. It was surgical. He stopped a few inches from Bron. Looked him in the eyes. Bron didn't move. Didn't speak. No one did. The crowd started chanting, unsure what to chant. Welcome back, collided with Holy *T, which got swallowed by Roman's back, before falling into silence again. It was chaos layered under confusion layered under awe. Bron's eyes didn't move. He wasn't looking past Roman. He wasn't trying to anticipate a punch or a cheap shot. He was just looking. Like a rookie pilot staring down a storm system on radar. Then Roman smiled. It wasn't a full smile. Just a sliver. One corner of the mouth raised. A knowing smile. A dominant smile. A smile that said, you thought this was your moment. You thought you were rising. And now I'm here. He didn't speak. Didn't raise a mic. He lifted a single finger and pointed at Bron's chest. Not a jab. Just a gesture. Then he turned. Walked back to the ropes. And that's when it happened. The masked man slid into the ring without a sound. Bron flinched, but didn't move back. Instinct kicked in. But he wasn't fast enough. The enforcer exploded into motion. One smooth spin and delivered a short, brutal back elbow to Bron's jaw. The kind you only learn in military-style close-quarters training. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just effective. Bron staggered. Didn't fall. Then a gut punch. 2 ribs to the left. Bron doubled. Then the masked man stepped back and speared him. Not Roman's spear. This one was faster. Tighter. Like a bullet. Bron flipped off the mat. Hit hard. The arena erupted. Half in shock, half in ecstasy. Roman never looked back. He exited the ring. Walked up the ramp. The masked man followed a few beats later. Still no music. No lighting cues. No announcement. Just the WWE logo flashing across the screen as Bron Breakker lay flat on his back, eyes open, staring into lights that suddenly felt a lot colder. In that single moment, WWE history split. This was not just another superstar returning from injury. This was not a legend reclaiming his throne. This was an ambush on the narrative. For months, WWE had been moving toward a post-Roman era. Seth Rollins held the World Heavyweight title with pride. Cody Rhodes had finally finished his story. Bron Breakker had bulldozed through the roster like a one-man evolution. Even Solo Sikoa had started carving out his own lane, free from Roman's shadow. But all of that was under the assumption that Roman was done. Retired. Watching from his compound in Pensacola. Satisfied with what he'd built. The silence in the arena as Roman walked out told a different story. He hadn't left. He'd just stepped back to reload. Now he was back, and not alone. And Bron Breakker, the man poised to be WWE's next apex predator, became a warning sign for everyone else. There was no need for a promo. The statement had been made, the tribal chief has gone to war. And he brought something new with him. In wrestling, momentum is everything. It's not just about wins. It's about the feeling that someone can't be stopped. The aura. The inevitability. The sense that every time they walk down that ramp, they're walking closer to a crown that already has their name on it. That was Bron Breakker in 2025, 6 months undefeated. No stumbles, no slip-ups, no misfires. He wasn't just winning matches, he was destroying people. Veterans. Champions. Fan favorites. Didn't matter. Bron was ripping through the roster like a man who hadn't read the script. Every time his music hit, fans stood up, not to cheer, but to witness. Like you'd stand up if a train came crashing through the wall. He had the look, the build, the intensity, and the bloodline. The son of Rick Steiner. The nephew of Scott Steiner. Genetics made him dangerous. Work ethic made him terrifying. And when Bron barked, it wasn't just for show. It was a war cry. So, when WWE positioned him as the rising face of the company after Roman's absence, it wasn't a gamble, it was a coronation. He had all the right enemies, all the right momentum, and all the right moments lining up for him. That's why Money in the Bank was supposed to be his night. Supposed to be. Bron walked into MITB with the same attitude he'd walked into every arena with for months, head high, eyes locked forward, muscles coiled like steel cables. You don't just prepare for a match when you're Bron. You prepare to dominate it. Before the show, he was seen backstage, laughing with Shawn Michaels. He did press. He talked about carrying the future on his back. He said it was his time now, not out of arrogance, but because no one could tell him otherwise. He wasn't wrong. He was fast. Explosive. Strategic. He'd improved on the mic. His ring IQ had leveled up since NXT. And most importantly, he had presence, the kind you can't teach. The first half of the night went as expected. Bron entered the men's MITB match like a predator. He picked his spots. Slammed Ricochet through a ladder. German suplexed LA Knight off the second rope. He turned a 6-man chaos match into a personal highlight reel. And when he finally won it, standing on top of the ladder with the briefcase in one hand and a busted lip on his face, he looked like a man ready to cash in on the company itself. The crowd roared. Not because they loved Bron, necessarily. He was still too raw, too unpredictable. But they respected him. The way fans respect a storm when it moves across the plains. He stood in the center of the ring after the match. Briefcase dangling from his fist. His chest pumping. He dropped to a knee, stared into the hard cam, and mouthed 4 words, "I run this now." And then everything changed. Roman appeared. And the man who had just told the world he ran the place suddenly looked like a man who wasn't sure what room he was even in. It was subtle, at first. Bron turned toward the entrance like it was a false alarm. Like he didn't believe what he was seeing. You could see it in his hands, the briefcase grip shifted, fingers relaxing. You could see it in his stance, his weight stopped bouncing between feet. Bron Breakker, the man who barked at every opponent, didn't make a sound. When Roman walked into view, Bron's energy dropped. Not all at once, but like a power line being severed inch by inch. This wasn't fear. That's too easy. Fear is loud. Fear makes you backpedal. Bron didn't do that. He didn't retreat. He stood his ground. But he stood it like a man who suddenly wasn't sure where the ground was. It was disorientation. That's what people missed in the replays. It wasn't just shock. It was recalibration. In Bron's mind, Roman wasn't supposed to be here. The ring had just been claimed. The map had just been redrawn. Bron had already counted Roman out of the war. But now the king had returned, and not just returned, but returned with backup. Returned with silence. Returned with something that Bron hadn't prepared for. That's what cracked him. Bron wasn't physically beaten. Not yet. He wasn't winded or bloodied or injured. He was shaken. Because this wasn't about a match. This was about momentum, and how fast it can be stolen. For 6 months, Bron had built himself into a wrecking machine. And in less than 60 seconds, Roman Reigns stripped that away with nothing but an entrance and a look. That's the kind of psychological warfare most veterans never learn. It's what made Roman more than just a title holder. It's what made him a legend. He knows how to rewrite the terms of conflict. To walk into a room and make the strongest man in it question himself. Bron Breakker is still a beast. Still a threat. Still one of the most gifted athletes in the business. That hasn't changed. But on that night, in that moment, he wasn't the apex predator. He was the hunted. The worst part? He knew it. You could see it in his eyes after the spear from the masked enforcer. He wasn't looking up at the lights in shock. He was trying to understand what just happened. His lips moved, replaying the sequence. His eyes weren't wide, they were calculating. Trying to find the crack in his own armor. Because that's the real damage Roman did. Not the elbow. Not the gut punch. Not even the spear. It was the seed of doubt planted deep in Bron's psyche. A man who had dominated every moment of his career now had to ask himself one question: what do I do when someone shows up that I didn't see coming? And worse. What if they were always 2 steps ahead? That's the difference between dominance and legacy. Dominance is about the now. Legacy is about what you leave behind that still controls the now. Bron Breakker dominated his era. Roman Reigns returned to remind everyone whose shadow that era still lives in. Who is the masked enforcer? The man behind the mask didn't say a word. He didn't need to. One spear. One elbow. One brutal punch to the ribs. That was all it took to drop Bron Breakker, and set the entire wrestling world on fire with speculation. This wasn't just a masked wrestler. This was a message. He didn't walk like a lackey. Didn't move like muscle. He moved like someone trained for precision. Someone who knew how to enter a ring with purpose and exit without chaos. And most importantly, someone who wasn't debuting. He was being deployed. As Roman Reigns walked back up the ramp without ever speaking a word, fans weren't just asking why he returned, they were obsessed with who was walking behind him. Because that person wasn't just a prop. He was a symbol. The black tactical gear. The masked face. The fists. The discipline. The echoes of the Shield weren't subtle. They were surgical. But here's what made it even more unsettling: this wasn't nostalgia. This was a remix. Let's break it down piece by piece. First, the mask. WWE has a long tradition of masked characters. From Kane to Mankind, The Fiend to Retribution's debacle, masks have always served 2 purposes: hide identity and redefine it. This mask wasn't ornate or gothic. It wasn't theatrical. It was blank. Matte black. Military style. Tactical lenses. No expression. No voice modulation. No voice at all. It didn't speak of mythology. It spoke of utility. It looked less like something created by WWE's design team, and more like something borrowed from a kill team. Then there was the movement. When he entered the ring, he didn't slide in like a showman. He flowed in like a SWAT operator breaching a room. Shoulders low. Steps measured. All focus. And when he struck Bron? It was with maximum efficiency. No wasted motion. No rope running or taunting. He hit hard and left. Which leads to the biggest question, who the hell is he? Theories exploded within minutes. Reddit threads crashed under the weight of predictions. Twitter went into full CSI mode. WWE fans scoured slow-motion footage, comparing builds, gaits, and stances. Here are the leading suspects, and what each possibility would mean. It's the obvious first theory. Solo has the bloodline. He has history with Roman. He's been off-screen just long enough for a return to hit hard. And he knows how to hit like that. But there are problems. Solo's build is different. Stockier. Thicker in the legs. The masked enforcer looked taller, leaner, faster. Plus, Solo has a known presence. A rhythm. This enforcer moved with more precision, less brawler-style energy. If it's Solo, it's a character shift, and a massive one. But here's the twist, Roman doesn't do sideways moves. He doesn't repackage allies. If Solo was involved, he'd be front and center. This felt new. Some fans think it's a top NXT recruit. There's logic there. Roman could be grooming someone from scratch, a new Reigns-era soldier. Maybe a silent killer. Someone like Oba Femi, if the size matched. Maybe a dark horse like Lexus King, reimagined as a destroyer. But that raises another issue. If this is an NXT call-up, why not reveal him? Why hide him behind a mask unless the identity is critical? Which brings us to a more layered idea. Could it be someone we already know? That's where things get dark. Some fans think the mystery man is someone who has already been part of WWE, but was rebuilt. Possibilities include Jason Jordan, once tagged as the next Kurt Angle, sidelined by injury. Tall, explosive, and overlooked. Tucker, formerly of Heavy Machinery. Lost in creative wilderness. Reinventing as a silent assassin? Dominik Dijakovic, former NXT standout. Tall. Agile. Had a stint as T-Bar, but with real potential. This theory hits harder because it suggests Roman isn't recruiting. He's resurrecting. Not just careers, but belief systems. Because let's remember what the Shield was. The Shield wasn't about entrance music. It wasn't about ring gear. It was a mission. Disrupt. Dominate. Control. If Roman's enforcer is a returned, repurposed warrior, it would mean he's not building a faction. He's forming a doctrine. A set of values based on silence, violence, and loyalty. Which leads to the scariest theory of all. WWE doesn't always do swerves for the sake of them. But when they do, they tend to matter long-term. There's a darker idea brewing online. One that suggests the enforcer isn't a former wrestler, or even a new one. What if it's a symbol? Someone playing a role. Not as a debuting character, but as a placeholder for something bigger. Like a Shield template. Remember, the Shield was 3 men, Ambrose, Rollins, Reigns. But now, it's just Reigns. What if he's rebuilding that idea, with new pieces? And this masked enforcer is just one piece? That would make the identity irrelevant, for now. Because the mask is the identity. It says, you're not a person. You're a weapon. That's a terrifying thought. Because it means Roman isn't reviving the Shield. He's mutating it. A new faction built not on camaraderie or rebellion, but on control and silence. That's why the mask matters. Because masks aren't just concealment, they're surrender. To wear a mask like that and take orders like that means you've given up ego. You've become a tool. And if Roman is wielding tools instead of teammates, he's more dangerous than he's ever been. This leads to a final, chilling possibility. What if this wasn't about revealing an identity? What if it was about revealing intent? Roman didn't show up to reintroduce someone. He showed up to remind Bron Breakker, and everyone watching, that no matter how far they think they've climbed, they're still beneath him. The mask wasn't a disguise. It was a warning. A reminder that Reigns doesn't play checkers. He plays war. In wars, generals don't tell you who's coming. They let the body count speak for itself. Bron Breakker was the first. Not the last. Whoever the masked enforcer is, one thing is now clear. He's not just a man. He's a weapon. And Roman just showed us what happens when you bring a weapon to a coronation. They were supposed to be finished. The Shield debuted in 2012 like a thunderclap, 3 men in riot gear, fists clenched, built around justice and anarchy in equal measure. Dean Ambrose. Seth Rollins. Roman Reigns. No entrance music. No flashy gear. Just purpose. Just fists. Just a mission. Back then, they called themselves the Hounds of Justice. They weren't asking for permission, they were demanding control. And for a while, they took it. They tore through John Cena, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, the Wyatts, Evolution. They didn't feud. They punished. But it ended, like all dominant units do, not from outside pressure, but from inside fracture. Seth Rollins swung a steel chair into Roman Reigns' back on June 2, 2014, and the legacy started bleeding. Over the next decade, each member charted his own course. Seth Rollins became the architect of his own legacy, betrayer, redeemer, world champion, messiah. Dean Ambrose, now Jon Moxley, blew up the system entirely, leaving WWE and becoming a world destroyer in AEW. And Roman Reigns? He became the tribal chief. No more hound. No more brotherhood. Just bloodline. Paul Heyman helped sell the transformation. Roman wasn't part of a faction anymore. He was a dynasty. He didn't need flak jackets or fists in. He had family. He had gold. He had dominance. He didn't need the Shield. And he said so, again and again. So did Heyman. At SummerSlam 2023, Heyman stood in the ring and made it official. The Shield is dead, he proclaimed. Roman Reigns doesn't need a brotherhood. He built a bloodline. He built a kingdom. And the WWE Universe believed him. How could they not? The Shield wasn't just gone, it was buried. No callbacks. No merch pushes. No nostalgia-fueled reunions. The fist pose was never seen again. The black and gray gear disappeared. The triple powerbomb was locked in the vault. It was over. But something about Roman's return at Money in the Bank 2025 shattered that certainty. Because when he walked down that ramp in silent fury, wearing modified tactical gear and flanked by a masked enforcer dressed in similar style, it wasn't just a callback. It was a resurrection. But not of the Shield as we knew it. This was different. This wasn't justice. It was domination. The original Shield worked as a unit, 3 men with different skills, bonded by chaos. But the version we saw return last night wasn't a team. It was a hierarchy. Roman in front. The enforcer behind. No ambiguity. That's not brotherhood. That's command. Which forces a hard question, is this really the Shield reborn? Or is it something more dangerous? Because back then, the chaos had a purpose. Now? The chaos is personal. Roman Reigns isn't stepping back into familiar gear for nostalgia. He's taking the iconography of the Shield and weaponizing it for psychological warfare. The tactical vest. The black boots. The silent arrival. The discipline. They're not tribute. They're tools. The reason it stings more is because Roman buried the Shield himself, publicly, brutally, definitively. He moved past it. Claimed to have outgrown it. Called it a stepping stone. So, for him to reach back into that legacy now? It means something. It means he controls the story, not the fans, not the past, not the other members. It's reclamation. Reinvention. And if the Shield is his to repurpose, then he's rewriting history in his image. Seth Rollins once said that the Shield was built on loyalty and sacrifice. But Roman's return sent a new message: the Shield wasn't about loyalty. It was about leverage. And right now, Roman has all of it. Let's talk symbolism. The Shield's entrance was never about flash. They came in through the crowd. Surrounded by people, but untouchable. They didn't need pyro. The power was in their presence. Roman used that exact same language at Money in the Bank. No music. No lighting change. No words. Just presence. That wasn't an accident. It was a calculated return to the most dangerous version of himself. Not the champion. Not the tribal leader. The hunter. Roman used the Shield aesthetic like a scalpel, cutting into Bron Breakker's momentum with surgical silence. Even the decision to send a masked enforcer instead of delivering the final blow himself speaks volumes. In the old Shield days, they attacked as a pack. Now, Roman doesn't need to hit. He commands others to. He doesn't bark orders. He doesn't need to. They know. That's power. That's fear. That's legacy. There's also a subtle middle finger embedded in this return, one aimed squarely at Seth Rollins. Remember, Seth always framed himself as the brains of the Shield. The strategist. The architect. He was the one who betrayed the group to side with the authority. He's also the one who most often invoked the Shield in interviews, in promos, even in gear. He wore all white to contrast the original black. He referenced their brotherhood in his feud with Roman. He honored the legacy. Roman ignored it. Until now. Now, he's taking the Shield image and reshaping it as a weapon, not to celebrate it, but to remind people that he was the core. He was the constant. Seth needed to betray it to rise. Dean needed to leave it behind entirely. Roman? He just needed to wait. And when he brought it back, it wasn't a reunion. It was a warning. One man. One mask. One mission. It raises another haunting idea: what if this isn't the Shield? What if this is the opposite? The Shield was about justice. About fighting corrupt authority. Disrupting power. This version? This version is power. It doesn't fight the system, it is the system. Roman is no longer an insurgent. He's the general. The one who commands silence, shadows, obedience. If the Shield were formed today, they wouldn't be fighting Roman Reigns. They'd be fighting for him. That's the evolution. That's what makes this return so chilling. The Shield's legacy wasn't just about who they beat. It was about what they represented. Roman took that representation and turned it inside out. It's not about justice anymore. It's about control. And now, instead of fists in, there's just one finger pointing forward. And a soldier standing behind him, waiting to strike. That's not nostalgia. That's a signal. Every great ambush starts with distraction. In warfare, it's smoke and noise. In politics, it's spin. In WWE? It's chaos wrapped in spectacle. Money in the Bank 2025 was already being praised before Roman Reigns ever appeared. The crowd in Toronto was electric. The card was loaded. The rumors swirling ahead of time had everything to do with title changes, heel turns, surprise entries into the men's MITB match. Not one credible insider mentioned Roman. That's not just secrecy. That's masterclass misdirection. Let's start with the booking. On paper, MITB 2025 looked like the culmination of WWE's next-gen push. Cody Rhodes as the face of the company. Bron Breakker as the rocket-fueled enforcer waiting for his moment. Logan Paul stirring the pot. LA Knight throwing elbows of charisma. A returning Randy Orton teasing one final run. The storylines were tight. Everything felt like it was moving forward. Even the promotional material told that story. No tribal chief on posters. No cryptic teasers. No Heyman monologues hyping a resurrection. The focus was crystal clear, the new era was here. And that's what made the ending hit like a blindside punch to the soul. Let's rewind the build. The men's MITB ladder match had a very specific arc. Seth Rollins was originally scheduled to appear, but injured his knee 2 weeks prior during a brutal match against Gunther. Fans were disappointed, but the angle made sense. Seth was being protected. In his place, WWE inserted Carmelo Hayes, leaning into the youth movement. This was clearly Bron's moment. WWE didn't hide it. Bron entered last. He tore through the match like a wrecking ball. He took a ladder to Logan Paul's ribs. German suplexed Cameron Grimes into the LED board. Speared LA Knight so hard the second rung of a ladder snapped. The match became his coronation. And the fans were into it. They didn't love him, necessarily, but they respected what they saw. A breakout performance from a man who had been treated like the future and finally looked like it. When Bron finally unclipped the briefcase and dropped to his knees, the pop was loud. Not Cena in 2008 loud. But real. Earned. What happened next wasn't a sudden shock. It was a slow tightening of air. The lights didn't flicker. The music didn't cut. There wasn't even a sense of build-up. The audience was still celebrating. Camera flashes were popping. The ring announcer hadn't even finished the line, and your 2025 Mr. Money in the Ba, that's when it happened. A fan in the front row looked toward the entrance and pointed. The camera, reacting to nothing, cut wide. And there he was. Roman Reigns. Just standing there. It wasn't the return itself that hit hard. It was how it was handled. Because WWE didn't lean into spectacle. They leaned into silence. Roman didn't step out onto the stage like a returning legend. He just appeared. Mid-walk. No music. No video wall. No drama. It was anti-drama. Surgical. Precise. And that's where the genius of WWE's booking came in. Every detail of the show was designed to pull attention away from Roman. Cody's brutal Iron Man defense against Randy Orton had people buzzing. The women's MITB match ended with a chaotic finish that involved 4 women tangled in a ladder tower. Even backstage interviews with Paul Heyman made zero mention of Roman. Heyman, when asked who he believed would take over the company next, responded, "The tribal throne is vacant. Let the wolves fight for the bones." Looking back, that line wasn't a metaphor. It was a setup. He wasn't describing the future. He was describing the bait. Because every second of MITB 2025 was carefully curated to make one idea feel inevitable, Bron Breakker was the new face. They didn't oversell it. They didn't hammer it. They let the action speak. Bron stood tall with the briefcase, sweat and blood mixing on his face, the crowd pulsing, and the camera locked in tight. The image told you everything, this is the man. And just when that idea felt secure, Roman shattered it. Not with force. With presence. WWE knew exactly how to frame it. A wide-angle camera. No cutaways. No commentary. Just Bron turning his head. Slowing down. His barking silence replaced by stillness. And the fans? They didn't cheer. They gasped. You could hear it on the broadcast. The sound of a few thousand people realizing that something was wrong. Something unaccounted for. And that's what WWE did perfectly. They didn't just hide Roman's return. They made us feel like we were in control of the narrative, until we weren't. Because storytelling, especially in wrestling, isn't about what you say. It's about what you withhold. And WWE withheld the king. Until the right moment to take back his throne. It's worth analyzing the decision to bring Roman back here, not at WrestleMania, not at SummerSlam, but at MITB. Money in the Bank is chaos by design. It's unpredictable. Matches are messy. Emotions run high. It's the one night of the year where a mid-card talent can become main event instantly. That unpredictability creates blind spots. And blind spots are where Roman thrives. It's why his return worked better, because no one was looking for it. Bron Breakker had just finished climbing a metaphorical mountain. And Roman made sure to meet him at the top, not to shake hands, but to push him off. So what does that say about the build? It says the game was rigged from the start. The stage was set not to launch a new era, but to highlight the illusion of one. Cody was defending. Seth was healing. Braun was rising. And Roman? He was watching. Not as a man waiting for his turn. But as a king waiting for the coronation to end, so he could remind everyone who owns the crown. He didn't say a word. That's the most unsettling part. Roman Reigns didn't need a mic, a monologue, or a catchphrase to reclaim the spotlight at Money in the Bank 2025. He didn't need Paul Heyman to declare him the tribal chief again. He didn't need pyro. He didn't even need his titles. He just needed presence. And silence. That silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate. Weaponized. Tactical. Because the Roman Reigns that returned at MITB didn't walk like a king returning to court. He walked like a man preparing for battle. He didn't dress like royalty. He dressed like war. This was not the Roman Reigns we've grown used to. The one who sat at the head of the table, dressed in Samoan symbolism and championship gold. That Roman operated like a godfather. Cold, controlled, ceremonial. This new Roman is stripped down. Unadorned. Dead-eyed. The tactical gear wasn't just a nod to the Shield, it was armor. He looked less like a tribal figurehead and more like a commander in the field. This wasn't a rehash. It was evolution. And evolution is dangerous. The tribal chief ruled through fear, family, and psychology. He had the Usos and Solo as his soldiers, Heyman as his voice, and the Universal Championship as his crown. He made opponents feel small through dominance and legacy. That Roman was a tyrant disguised as royalty. This one is something colder. A war general. Let's define the difference. A tribal chief demands loyalty. He draws power from tradition, bloodline, and fear of exile. A war general builds armies. He draws power from strategy, deception, and control of chaos. The old Roman made people acknowledge him. This Roman doesn't care if you acknowledge him, he's already ahead of you. He's not ruling anymore. He's conquering. Look at how he returned. He didn't call the camera to him. He walked straight toward the ring like a weapon being unsheathed. And that's not metaphor. It's math. Roman didn't just reclaim presence. He used it. He waited until the one man the company had been building up, Bron Breakker, was at his most celebrated, his most invincible, and he cracked him in half with nothing but a stare and a soldier. That's not ego. That's psychology. And it marks a shift in tactics. Because if Roman were still acting as tribal chief, this would have been a ceremony. He would have summoned Heyman. He would have walked slowly, stood on the stage, let the chants start up organically. He would have let the moment breathe. But he didn't. He kept it cold. Fast. Tactical. In and out. Statement made. And it's not just about how he returned, it's why he returned. Roman didn't show up to chase titles. He didn't point to the belt. He didn't gesture to the briefcase. He didn't even look at the championship Cody had retained earlier in the night. That silence means something. It means Roman's new mission isn't gold. It's control. There are no family ties anymore. The bloodline, as we knew it, is fractured. Jimmy and Jay are doing their own thing. Solo's future is clouded. Heyman hasn't been seen at Roman's side for weeks. And yet, Roman didn't come back to fix it. He came back with something else behind him. A masked enforcer. An unnamed weapon. And that's what's different. The tribal chief sat on a throne. This Roman builds machines. He doesn't need loyalty. He doesn't even need faces. He needs silence, obedience, and violence. Let's talk movement. The way Roman moved told the story. Not slow. Not plotting. Not arrogant. Efficient. Direct. Military. He walked to the ring, disrupted Bron Breakker's moment, turned his back without a word, and let the damage be done by proxy. That's not just physical dominance. That's command structure. He's not the one swinging anymore. He's the one pointing. And when he points, things fall. This is warfare. That's why calling him the tribal chief now feels outdated. Because what tribe is left? The family dynamic is gone. The council is disbanded. Roman isn't sitting at the head of a table. He's standing in front of a battlefield. And behind him isn't blood. It's steel. The man in the mask is proof. Roman is not rebuilding his empire with brothers. He's doing it with soldiers. The Shield, as we knew it, was a brotherhood. Even at their most dysfunctional, they were equals, rotating leadership. Shared goals. Fists in. This is a hierarchy. A cold, black hierarchy where faces are hidden and orders are absolute. Roman is no longer interested in alliances. He's building an apparatus. And that's why this new era is more dangerous than anything we've seen before. Because titles can be lost. Families can betray. But systems? Systems endure. Roman is building a system. A doctrine. No colors. No bloodline chants. No Samoan heritage speeches. Just war. That's why he didn't speak. That's why he didn't reclaim his throne. He's not looking to rule. He's looking to erase the current map and redraw it in his image. And it starts with Bron. Bron Breakker wasn't targeted because he was weak. He was targeted because he was strong. Too strong. Too hot. Too fast to rise. Roman needed to send a message, not just to Bron, but to the locker room. No matter how far you rise. No matter how many people chant your name. No matter how many ladders you climb. If Roman wants your momentum, he will take it. Not through a challenge. Through force. That's not a chief. That's a warlord. That's a new phase. And it's already begun. You don't see it right away. Not unless you know what you're looking for. The lights didn't change. The camera didn't cut. There was no scream, no commentary line, no musical cue. But for those watching closely, for those really paying attention, there was a moment inside Money in the Bank 2025 where Bron Breakker broke. And it wasn't during the spear. It wasn't during the ambush. It happened seconds before any of that. When Bron Breakker locked eyes with Roman Reigns. That was it. That was the fracture. Let's rewind to that second. Bron was fresh off his MITB victory. Blood on his lip. Breathing hard, but not struggling. In that moment, he was peaking. Mentally, physically, narratively. He was on the mountain. A beast who'd just slayed every contender thrown his way. He had the briefcase. He had the crowd's attention. He had the WWE Universe halfway convinced that the torch had finally passed. Then something changed. Roman appeared on the ramp. Not to music. Not to pyro. Not to a pop. Just there. And Bron's instincts kicked in. At first, the body language was confusion. Slight tilt of the head. A micro-step backward. Not a retreat, but a brace. Like when a dog stops barking because it smells something it doesn't understand. You could see it happen live, the adrenaline froze. The ego paused. The alpha instinct stumbled. Then came the eye contact. Roman didn't blink. Didn't flinch. His eyes locked on Bron like a sniper sighting. Cold. Fixed. Not hostile. Not emotional. Just measured. And Bron? He didn't bark. He didn't yell. He didn't move. He looked back, and everything changed. The commentary team noticed it, but they didn't articulate it. How could they? They were as stunned as everyone else. But the camera caught it. Bron's breath shortened. His jaw clenched. Not in anger. In recalculation. Because in that second, Bron Breakker realized he was unprepared. Not physically. Not technically. He was unprepared mentally. This wasn't a fight he'd planned for. Roman had been gone. Off the radar. Not in the locker room. Not in the promos. Not in the storyboards. Bron had been conditioned to believe Roman was history. He trained for the current roster. He focused on Cody, Seth, LA Knight, Gunther. He didn't train for ghosts. And Roman was a ghost that walked like a general. So when their eyes met, the gears in Bron's mind jammed. He wasn't looking at an opponent. He was looking at a question he didn't have an answer to. And that's where it broke. Let's talk psychology. Combat psychology is a real field. In mixed martial arts, in military training, in high-stakes sports, there's a moment called the collapse curve. It's the second a person realizes they've miscalculated the situation, and their entire strategy slips out from under them. That's what happened in that second of locked eyes. Bron didn't fall. He didn't flinch. But the plan, the entire blueprint he'd carried into that night, dissolved. Watch his fingers. He was clenching the MITB briefcase tight. When Roman appeared, his grip loosened. Slightly. Just enough to notice. His stance shifted too, wide-legged to flat-footed. His center of gravity dropped. Not in anticipation of a fight. In uncertainty. He stopped being the predator. He became the deer. Not because Roman was bigger. Not because Roman was louder. But because Roman wasn't playing the same game anymore. Roman didn't show up to challenge. He showed up to take. That's a different energy. A different kind of pressure. And Bron, for the first time in his WWE career, had no counter for it. He stood frozen, not in fear, but in awe. His mind was racing. He was trying to process the variable. Who's behind Roman? Why now? Am I being targeted? Do I drop the case? Do I attack? And the longer he stood there, the smaller he looked. Not physically. But narratively. Roman had just walked into the arena without speaking, and somehow every fan, every camera, every commentator stopped reacting to Bron. That silence? That was the shift in momentum. Bron Breakker wasn't the center of the story anymore. He had been replaced. In real time. By presence alone. That does something to a man. Especially a man who's built himself on intensity, control, and physical dominance. Bron was the guy who threw couches backstage during promos. The guy who walked into brawls like they were job interviews. The guy who didn't blink under pressure. Until now. Because pressure didn't walk down that ramp. Judgment did. That's what Roman brought with that stare. Not fury. Not vengeance. Just judgment. You're not ready. You don't belong. You thought you were king. That kind of eye contact is the oldest tool in combat. The silent test. And Roman passed it. Bron didn't. He blinked. Not literally. Mentally. And that crack, the mental blink, is what opened the door. That's when the masked enforcer slid into the ring. Bron didn't see him at first. He was still locked on Roman. That's why he didn't counter the elbow to the jaw. That's why his defense lagged. Because his mind was still playing catch-up. Roman hadn't touched him. Hadn't spoken. Hadn't lifted a finger. And yet Bron was already compromised. That's not just good booking. That's character assassination, done without a punch. WWE has rarely done this level of subtle dismantling. They didn't beat Bron Breakker in a match. They removed his armor piece by piece in front of 20,000 people. And all of it began with a look. What happens now? That's the scary part. Because moments like this don't just end feuds. They rewrite identities. When a man built on physical dominance gets unraveled by psychological trauma, there are only two ways forward: he rebuilds, stronger, more calculating, and maybe darker. He crumbles, lost in the void of doubt. The Bron Breakker we knew, the one who stormed through NXT, bulldozed the main roster, screamed like a rabid dog, might be gone. Not because he lost, but because he saw something he couldn't unsee. That's what makes this moment iconic. The stare wasn't a beat. It was a pivot. Everything Bron was before Money in the Bank ended the second he made eye contact with Roman Reigns. The body held. But the mind broke. And that's the kind of damage you don't heal from overnight.